Confidence. Today we're going to be looking at something I thought was appropriate for this new year. It's the idea of letting go of some grudges, hurts, bitterness, pains of the past. Some of those people that may have hurt you or things that were said about you that you've been hanging on to that maybe it's time to let go and to enter into this new year letting God be the judge. So we're looking at chapter 4, and that would be on page 51. Page 51. Confidence in God's ability to avenge. I start off with this question: how confident are you that God will take care of those people in your life who have hurt you, offended you, brought you pain, have mistreated you? Is there a trust that God knows how to take care of people?
It's a hard one.
It's a hard one. It is a hard one. Yes, absolutely. It is a hard one. It's hard to not take vengeance into our own hands. As we look at this very first part here, let me try and do that today, babe. So that way you can eat your donut and play with him, and I can... Didn't think that'd disappoint you too bad. God knows how to dish out divine, creative, customized, loving discipline that will hold each of us accountable. I can say in my own life that God, in His own creative, timely, customized way, has held me accountable for my past. Things about my character that I needed to be showed. God brought a woman into my life to be a mirror, to show me some of those things that I need to work on. That's the goodness of spouses. Sometimes situations turn in such a way that in that situation is almost a built-in accountability for something that we needed to be made accountable for. And for those of us who are believers, we believe God cares about our characters. He cares about our lives. So He disciplines us. He brings accountability to us lovingly that's going to help us. God knows how to dish out divine, creative, customized, loving discipline that will hold us and everyone else accountable. So here's the question for us today. If we trust that, how do we surrender our offender to God? That person that maybe we're still holding a grudge against, or that person, when we think about them, that makes us angry. How do we surrender our offender to God? One of the things I have a struggle with comes right here in Romans 12:19, and it's this. It's the scripture that says, "It is mine to avenge, I will repay." That's the word of the Lord to us. It is mine to avenge, I will repay. Here's what I do. I replace that word mine with Donnie. It is Donnie's to avenge, and he will repay. Instead of allowing God to be God and bring about accountability, I sometimes take that process into my own hands. And there is a role for us to play oftentimes when it comes to lovingly confronting someone. But for the most part, how do we surrender our offender to God? Because sometimes we can't speak to our offender. Maybe they've moved away. Maybe they've passed on. Maybe they are in prison. Maybe they just don't want to talk to us. And so we can't...
Maybe they were just a stranger that just had a brief encounter with that we'll never see again.
Yeah. That's right. So there's got to be some way that the Bible teaches that we can surrender our offender to God where we can still live free, like that song we just talked about. Where somehow that other person's behavior does not get control of our lives. Somehow we have a power and a strength to respond in a way where we're not the victim of what has been done to us. I've said it before, but you've heard that phrase, don't let somebody else live rent-free in your brain. Mm-hmm. And an offender can oftentimes live rent-free in our brain where we're dwelling on it, consumed by it, and we can't get over it, and they get the privilege of dominating our thinking and our hearts. And that's not the way God wants us to live. There's got to be a way to surrender our offender where we can go on with life. And we're not controlled by something or someone that has brought pain to us. And there's got to be a way to work through this anger, because it is a source of definite anger. We need to trust in God's accountability system. Carol, can you read those two scriptures for us?
From each you or which
There's
one?
two.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
How about Carol Courtney? You can read those, and then we'll have Carol with the hat read some later.
David, once loved by King Saul, was later hated and despised by Saul. They have credited David with tens of thousands, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. Now understand and recognize that I am not guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you.
All right, thank you. Let me give us a little context of this story right here. We're talking about David. David that killed the giant. We're talking about David who was really good with the bow, with the sling. We're talking about David who knew how to play the harp and knew how to distract the evil spirits from Saul. Saul loved David at first. Whenever the evil spirit would come on King Saul, Saul would have David come in and play the harp, and then King Saul would be relieved of the evil spirit. So Saul thought that little kid called David, that shepherd boy, was a gold mine. Whenever he was tormented, David came in, played, and not only that, but David was a warrior, and he was faithful. He could be depended on. All these good things. He was loved by King Saul, but later he was despised by Saul. And here's why. David started going out and fighting these battles, and people started paying attention to his success, and they started praising him. In fact, the women came out in honor and adoration of David, and they sang this song with David. They credited tens of thousands, and they were singing this song about how wonderful this young shepherd boy was. And King Saul's hearing this and saying, I don't like this. Wait a minute, this guy, he's fine playing the harp, but I don't want him getting this kind of attention, especially when I'm the king. So what happens? Saul says, what more can this young David get? The kingdom? He's got all the attention. He's got the praise of the people. What more left is there for him except the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David, and he was angry toward David. Now look at this. The day came, and Saul made life miserable. Absolutely made life miserable for David. You ever have a boss like that? A spouse like that? No, we're not talking about that today. That makes life miserable on you, and all they want to do is find that opportunity to nail you. All they want to do is hurt you, belittle you, despise you. And it got so bad that Saul tried to kill David on multiple accounts, tried to throw a knife, a sword at him, missed him, got the wall instead. Tried to kill him a couple different times. Chased him about the countryside, so much so that David had to find caves and holes in the ground for safety because Saul had this relentless pursuit to kill him. Well, the day came, and you probably heard this story before, when Saul had to go to the bathroom. This is a true story in the Bible. He goes into this cave, and he's relieving himself. Some say he was sleeping, but others say that he was truly going to the restroom. Guess who happened to be in the back of this very cave? David. Saul doesn't know this. Saul's out there going through the wild hills and the mountainsides trying to find David, not knowing that David is in the back of this, and David was with his men. Here Saul is in there relieving himself. David sees it in the shadows. David comes up, and he draws his sword, but not to kill Saul, although this was the perfect opportunity. He chose not to kill Saul. Instead, guess what he does with his sword? He takes Saul's robe, which is flowing behind him, pulls off a little corner, cuts it very quietly. Saul doesn't know what's going on. And then David sneaks back into the back of the cave. Saul goes out of the cave. David comes out and says, "Hey, Saul!" And then he gives him this speech. And in this speech, this is what David says. Now understand and recognize, Saul, that I'm not guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. You're chasing me down to kill me, but I haven't done anything against you. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. And then David holds up the little piece of his robe and says, "I could have killed you, but I want this to be a sign. I want to show you that I'm not wanting to hurt you or to harm you." And then the profundity of this. David says to Saul, "May the Lord judge between you and me. And may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you." That's a powerful statement. Basically, David is surrendering his offender. Now, David does speak the truth to him. There is a place of lovingly confronting and speaking the truth. We need to do that in love. But David also had this incredible trust that God would avenge the wrongs that Saul had done to him. That's an incredible trust and a powerful truth for us to trust that God will take care of those who have meted out wrong in our lives. Let's look at page 54.
Hey, Donnie.
Yes.
Heard a reminder on Caleb yesterday that we need to give people permission to bother us, disturb us, insult us, annoy us. If you don't give them permission, then they don't have the power.
That's a good point. Let's look at the second paragraph, page 54. Carol with a hat, can you read that for us?
I think it's critical to understand that David entrusted Saul to God's avenging process. David believed that God would uphold his cause by delivering him from Saul's angry hand, and God did indeed vindicate David. However, David learned a valuable lesson. Vindication doesn't always come in the way we want it, or the time we want. David's confidence in God's ability to avenge is what caused Saul to respond with these words. "When a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed? May the Lord reward you well for the way you treated me today."
Here's the two key words in this idea of trusting God to avenge those who have wronged us. The way God does it and the timing of how God does it. We want people to be brought to accountability for how they treated us right now or in our time frame. It doesn't most often does not happen when we think it should, nor in the way that we think it should. Well, my boss mistreated me, and he favored other people over me, so I want to see him get fired. Well, maybe he won't get fired, and he won't be brought in accountability the way that we think he should, but later on down the road, maybe he won't get promoted, or maybe he'll come under some type of discipline. But there will be, we reap what we sow, and it's just a universal principle that works with all of us. David surrendered his offender by trusting that God would take care of him. And David said, "Saul, I don't agree with you. I don't like you necessarily. I don't believe in your leadership, but I'm not going to touch you myself. I'm not going to bring harm to you." And David trusted. What do you think about that so far? What thoughts come in your mind about that example?
So
Brooke?
my new experience just in the past couple months, and I've never done this before, but I had a bunch of, issues with coworkers and some other directors, and I finally just started praying for them. So it's almost like, with this, let it be in God's timing, but I'm going to surrender myself, even though I can't stand these people.
Yeah.
But just to even get to that point where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to surrender, because you could feel the strife in the room when we're having a meeting. You could cut it with a knife. It's so strong. And I even said that to these girls. I'm like, there's so much strife in this room. One of the girls had no idea what that word meant. The other girl was like, she knew what that meant. So to me, she must have some sort of biblical experience.
Yeah.
The other one had no clue, and she's the one that I have the problem with.
Yeah.
So I literally just was like, you know what, instead of me letting it affect who I am or make me not sleep at night or start thinking in my mind of like all these crazy things, really to just submit to God and pray for your enemy. And it's worked.
That's good. Great testimony.
We're
Carol,
not
you
good,
have-
but
Yeah.
Let go and let
it's
God.
worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just was gonna say, sometimes to your example of in the workplace, someone feeling like they're not being treated fairly, sometimes our thoughts aren't the same as God's.
Yeah.
You know, God has the full picture and is a lot wiser and knowledgeable than we are. So my thought is, sometimes we think we're getting picked on. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe we're acting out of line. You know, it's God's timing and what God sees, right?
Right.
What if God is trying to put us in their life?
Yeah.
Very well, yes. Very well could be.
Or like you said in your comment, what if God's trying to teach us something? We're mad at the other person, but it's
We
really...
think we're getting picked on, but maybe we all have faults, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. So I gave an illustration on page 55, and this was a true story. We don't have to read it, but I'll just tell you about it. I bought this Chevy S10 from a guy in Sacramento. And I thought, well, okay, we drove it together. The brakes weren't great, but I liked the price, $4,200. And I thought, this is a fairly good deal. And so I bought it because I wanted a little pickup. Little pickup's hard to find. Hard to find a little pickup at a reasonable price. Especially with the 6-cylinder for Reno, because you can't get around a 4-cylinder in Reno. Can barely make it on a 6. Well, I bought this truck from this guy. And then I came here to Smoggett. When I went into Smoggett, actually I tried to smog it in California, correction. Tried to go in, and they couldn't smog it. They said, you know, you've got issues with this, and you've got major issues. I said, well, what are the major issues? Well, then I brought it to Reno and took it to a mechanic, and he said, somebody has gone in and scratched off the check engine light meter, and your check engine light would be showing right now, but they've scratched it off. But you've got major issues with this vehicle, and the owner has scratched that off so that your check engine light wouldn't come on.
Nice.
And I was infuriated. As soon as I found that, I called this guy and said, hey, I want my money back. I'm going to give you your truck back. He said, a deal is a deal.
You bought it as is.
You bought it as is, and you have no idea how mad, how angry I was over this. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, he had to know what I'm talking about because the mechanic showed me. He says, this is intentional. He showed me the scratch marks on the little thing. He said, this doesn't happen on its own. Somebody has intentionally gone in, scraped out, probably because it couldn't pass smog, and the check engine light would have come on, so they went in and did that. So cost me $1,600 just to replace that, and then get the work done of what the problem was. So this $4,200 truck is becoming this black hole. And my wife is good. She has a lot of wisdom. She said, next time get the car smogged before you pay the bill. Which would have solved the whole problem. That's what you're supposed to do anyway. But I was so stupid that I said, oh yeah, I'll take it and I'll get it smogged after I paid him the money. Well, for the first time in my life, I thought about suing him. So I've never sued anybody, but I was that mad. And I didn't. I checked into it, and it would have been more trouble than it was worth. And even if you sue them and you win, you're responsible for getting the money from that person. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. If you sue them and you win, you have to identify their bank account or know where they work and go get their wages attached to get your money, which is the craziest thing I've ever heard of. It was really hard to surrender my offender to God in that situation because, sorry son, I yell when I preach. The offender, I couldn't do anything about it, but man, you talk about him, renting my brain for a long time. He was in it. And I was just so mad because it was just anger. Anger is a signal that a wrong needs to be righted. That's what anger is. There's distorted anger, there's definite anger. Distorted anger, I'm just learning this stuff on anger, but distorted anger is where you're frustrated, you're disappointed, but there's more facts to be had. Definite anger is when somebody does a definite wrong against you. And definite anger has to be confronted. Whereas distorted anger, you can pray your way through a lot of that because a lot of it's perception, frustration, and these kinds of things. I had to surrender my offender. It took some time. I don't know if God ever made that guy accountable. But I'll tell you what, like my one friend said, he said, I'd much rather be the guy who had his wallet stolen than the guy who stole the wallet. I could go to bed at night with peace. He couldn't, because he was confronted and he knew what had been done. That's the challenge. It's not easy. Were you going to say something, Ron?
My own story. Before being deployed to Iraq in 2003, I was living with a girlfriend in Southern California, and I'd been with her about 8 months. We were pretty solid. We decided it'd be a good idea to get a joint bank account together. I'd have some of my military pay deposited there so she could pay my bills that came. Well, I don't know, 8 months in, I start getting calls from my dad. He has creditors calling him because she's not paying the bills. So she used, I don't know, maybe $2,000 for new tires and rims for her Yukon, and left me with 7 bills in collections.
At least she didn't spend it on her boyfriend she had while you were gone.
I don't know. I can't testify to that it didn't happen, but it was probably only 5 years ago that I was finally able to say, you know what? There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
It's way out of my hands. God is the only one who has control now, so
Yeah.
gotta let it go. But it bothered me long